Hello! The Hilton Head Concours d'Elegance and Motoring Festival is bringing together a really special class this year. It's celebrating 70 years of the Mercedes-Benz 300 SL, and what we're doing is we're bringing together some of the first gullwings that were ever made. In fact, these are some of the first sports cars that came to the USA. And the reason why we talk about us so much is because we were the big catalyst and we were the big customer for this car. And that's why, as much as it's a German story, it really should be told with an American accent. And a lot of that really comes together when you talk about star power for this exotic. But well, as you can see, I'm not in Hollywood, I'm in Wisconsin, but I'm on the scene of this photo right here. It's Frank Lloyd Wright, and he's at the drawing studio and dormitories of his Taliesin estate. And there's also his 300S sedan and 300 SL coupe. As you can see, today the place looks exactly the same. That's because the Preservation Society does their job. But getting back to the photo, what we really love about it is it reminds us that Frank Lloyd Wright was a car guy. Now, it wasn't a secret, but it was also secondary because he was known for a lot bigger work. But if you look at his later stuff, you can really see that he incorporated cars not just as a sideshow, and he had his own collection, including a custom Continental. But no Eldorado. Now, the Mercedes-Benzes in our photo came directly from Max Hoffman, and Hoffman and Wright had a very cordial business friendship. Hoffman even invited Wright to the gala that was reintroducing Fiat to the United States because he knew how much Wright loved Italian design. We'll get more to that story in a moment, but Wright also consulted Hoffman when he needed some vehicles. He wanted a couple of VW vans for the Taliesin estate, and at one time he even wanted to be the first Porsche owner in Wisconsin. None of that really came through, but what was really good are these Mercedes, and the reason for that is because it was at the right time. Hoffman and Wright were still working together on his home in Rye, New York, and so Hoffman offered Wright a pretty good discount on these cars. Of course, that rate he gave him was still about double the annual income in 1956 when this deal happened. So as you take a closer look at this photo, and you really see you've got Wright posing with these cars and his custom office. So he was just 50 years early for MTV Cribs. But in all seriousness, Mercedes-Benz was probably the most satisfying brand for Wright's legacy. And that really starts with the first project that him and Hoffman did together, that dealership on Park Avenue. Wright did that because, well, the Guggenheim was dragging on. This was a perfect thing to do that was going to be quick, clean, and unfortunately it was done for Jaguar because, well, by the time that dealership was done, so was the relationship between Jaguar and Hoffman. So Max Hoffman had this beautiful dealership and nothing to put into it. So he closed down his other dealership with all those other brands, everything but Mercedes, because Mercedes had their own dealership down the street, but he put it all into that one place. And so it got packed with 3, 4, and often more car brands than that. And Wright didn't quite like that. In fact, he wrote to him and told him that he had a bijou, not wholesale, and that was his way of urging him to come back to one brand. And the funny thing about that is by the time this picture was taken, well, things were already in motion. Hoffman and Mercedes were getting a divorce, and Hoffman could really see that the Mercedes showroom was larger, so he did a little switcheroo, and he gave Benz the Wright showroom. And it really was the Wright showroom, because Mercedes held on to that for over 50 years as their flagship in Manhattan. And as far as the fate of the 300 SL in our picture, well, that feels kind of kismet because, as we've talked about before, a lot of the gullwings really came here first. In fact, it was basically 4 out of every 5 were right here in the USA. So later on, when collectors wanted them, well, if you were elsewhere in the world, you still came here to get them. And so we can tell you, thanks to the 300 SL registry, that that car is still alive and in Italy. And if you know anything about Frank Lloyd Wright, you know he cherished his time in Tuscany. It influences architecture, including places like here at Taliesin. So the whole story feels like it's come full circle, and it's a great reminder that the best cars have the best stories. It's also the reason why we hold these Concours events, because it really goes beyond the glass, the metal, and the rubber. It tells us about a soul, and we take the time to cherish it. That's why we know we'll see you there.